can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Don't touch me.
And obviously, this is the scene that everyone has seen and formed their own judgments. As Jimmy mentioned before, there have been more than 30 incidences where Eric Garner had been arrested, usually along the variety of selling loose cigarettes on the streets of Staten Island. The store owners had repeatedly complained, and law enforcement, you see about a half a dozen that are there, they went to arrest him. He put his hands up and he said, "No more, no more." And then we see what happened. There was the takedown. You heard him say, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And unfortunately, we know the fatal consequence that happened thereafter. And the ME, the medical examiner, ruled, in fact, that there was a homicide. But we now know that a grand jury has decided that Officer Pantaleo, who was the officer accused, does not or did not, his actions warrant an indictment. There will be, it sounds like the Department of Justice will now get involved after many calls for it, and also civil suit, as Doug mentioned, is not just possible, but all but indefinite as it will move forward here. All right, a lot of phone calls, and you have 4 guys who have been on both sides of this, from both currently defense attorneys and before that assistant prosecutors throughout our region. So I'm going to open up the phone lines to you at home, whether it's a question or a comment, and everyone around the table can jump in as they see fit. Let's start off in the Bronx. We've got Elaine on the line. Elaine, go right ahead. Thank you for holding.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm so disappointed in this outcome. I'm a registered nurse in Manhattan, and, you know, they train us yearly how to take someone down who is not behaving properly. But this is really, really a sad day for all our children and grandchildren. I talk to my kids every day how to conduct themselves around police officers. They're good people, police officers, and I know 90% of them are good. But this is a very sad day for that family, and something needs to be done.
Elaine, thank you. You know, Mayor, we've spoken in the last month, it seems, but certainly the last week. I had activists, I had ministers on. Anybody of color says, I have the conversation with my son. I tell him we have the talk. I put the hands on the steering wheel and everything else. The mayor today personalizing it with his son, and you can have an open debate. I mean, he's not a candidate anymore, he's the mayor, okay, and he represents everybody, including, in many ways, he's the chief of law enforcement. The chief of police reports to him. He made it very clear that there is a good and legitimate reason for communities of color to have a distrust of police and the policing tactics. How prevalent is this? And you've been on both sides where you had to work with police for convictions, and then you've been, obviously, you've been involved in some more high-profile cases in Westchester County of note. You've been involved in the Chamberlain case, most notably, where it really stems from that whole idea as to, is justice really blind, and do people of color get different treatment and have good reason to have fear of law enforcement?
Well, I think that in New York City in particular, there's an increased risk and an increased reason for you to be fearful of law enforcement, because for 12 years we've had a mayor whose policy was stop and frisk, which suggested that if I'm walking down the street in New York City and we're all together, that somehow it's all right for me to be singled out and put up against a wall and frisked for no reason at all. So that does not build trust. If anything, it builds fear, and it makes people distrustful. But beyond that, when you look at the outcomes of these cases, when you look at Kenneth Chamberlain's case, you have a 68-year-old man in his home on a medical alert call, and the police go and ask him if he's okay. He says he's all right, and you have them ultimately use racial slurs, break his door down, and kill him. It's difficult to expect that that would occur in anybody else's community. And then you have the district attorney say that the racial slurs were used, but they were used as a tactic to distract him. Now, I can't imagine any other community where you would say that it was all right for an anti-Semitic slur or for an anti-Irish or Italian slur to be used on a 68-year-old man when you're only there on a medical call. So those consistently inexplicable incidents breed contempt, and it makes people distrustful. And sometimes it makes it more difficult for the good officers to do their jobs as well.
But beyond the policing, okay, which is its own question, the system or the process. For many people, that their first introduction to the grand jury process, guys, they say, oh, look what went on in Ferguson. You had a DA with an agenda. He never wanted to have an indictment. Whether that's fair or not, we have the best legal system, a judicial system in the world, okay? I don't think anyone's going to debate there's a better one than this. Not perfect, okay? But my point is, you now have people questioning whether, forget the cops, whether the DAs want justice or not, or that they're trying to get the decision that they need. Whether that's fair or not, it's not healthy. Is it a healthy conversation to have, or do you guys think this further amps up the distrust into the system, not just the policing?
Well,
It's a real distrust. And it is something that needs to be discussed. And we do need to think about how it is now being further and further and further eroded, and what these two district attorneys could have done and what our governor could have done in order to ameliorate that. Appoint a special prosecutor, make it more transparent, and then there wouldn't be, or at least there wouldn't be that continued building of mistrust. Start training police officers. Rich, there were 233 allegations involving chokeholds in 2013. Since 2009, there's some 1,300 of them that are under investigation, of which 10 were substantiated, punishment was recommended, and then our former police chief reduced the punishment or eliminated the punishment. So what is the system telling the police? It's telling them it's fine, keep doing it even though it's banned. And our district attorneys are not making the system transparent enough in order to breed a little more trust in them. So our system is broken, albeit one of the best systems in the world.
Well, guess what? It's a political system. So these district attorneys, they're all elected officials. They've been elected by the people in that community. And if something's gone wrong and people think it should be more transparent, they have a right to vote for another district attorney. And maybe this is the process that needs to take place. Maybe people have to protest, and maybe there has to be political pressure in order for things to change.
I want to get to one quick call here, and then we'll go to a break. I know, Eric, we're up against it. Let's go to Toya calling us from Poughkeepsie. Toya, you're on the line.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. Appreciate it. This is just to watch the footage as a mother of a 20-year-old daughter in college, and I have a 10-year-old son, just to watch this man be taken down. That could have been my father, you know, and screaming out that he couldn't breathe, and none of the officers around even reacted to that, because sometimes, you know, in a situation, the officer probably was scared and nervous. I don't know why he would do that, but he was surrounded by other officers that could also been able to, you know, just pull it back or just stop him. It's an outrage for our system. And for you not to see that this was murder, it was just plain, it's murder. You know, I am trained in this field. I work with mentally disabled people, and we are trained to just, you know, take action and just really understand people and how we move and how we breathe. Where's the training for these officers? It's just very, very, very disturbing. And I'm sure that, you know, there are good cops out there. I have family in law enforcement. But this is an outrage to our justice system. It makes me nervous. Even my son walking to school, where are we protected? Am I protected? You know, it's just it's just cruel. It's cruel. And you ask, you know, is this prevalent in our communities? Yes, this has been going on forever. Come visit the communities, walk through, speak, talk to the people, get involved in the communities. You know, maybe it doesn't happen locally where you live, but this happens a lot, and something has to be done. You know, this is not something we can tolerate. And let me tell you, and I'm not just saying it can happen to people of color, it can also happen to, you know, Caucasian men. We all are in threat because there's no protection. There's no safeguards for us. And that has to be understood. Something has to be put in place.
Well, Toya, I thank you for your call. I want to try and get as many as I can this hour. I have to hit a break. When we come back, We are going to go live to Harlem. Dominic Carter is on the scene where in an hour's time, Reverend Al Sharpton will be speaking, and there'll be a lot of attention paid to what he says in the aftermath of the decision and his call as to what kind of protests New York should expect. Many people will be listening for his cues. We'll be hearing from him. And also, Dominic had an exclusive interview with the family of the Garner family, this prior to the decision that came down today. Some emotional reaction from his family. You'll hear that as well. Stay with us.